Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us here for this evening's City Council meeting and public hearing for the Alpharetta City Council, June 16th, 2025. Before I call the meeting to order, I just wanted to announce for anyone who had not seen this change, the new business item that was posted, the invitation to bid 25-013 fiscal year 2025 public safety fleet replacements has been deferred by staff to the July 28th, 2025 City Council meeting, just in case anyone was here for that item. So I will go ahead and call this meeting to order and note for the record that all members of council are present and accounted for. At this time, there are only 6 of us. So as we always do, we begin our meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you're willing and able, please stand and join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So the first item up on our agenda this evening are the work session items. These are not items that will be voted on by City Council today. This is simply a discussion when staff has some guidance needed from council on how they might proceed with some issues. So the first item that we'll be doing a work session with will be the solid waste and recycling collection services at Alpharetta Commons, 10 Roswell Street. I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Lagerbloom, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This might be more of a lengthy presentation just to give you the background of the benefit of how we've gotten to where we are today, and in hopes that I can get some direction to move forward. So let me zero you in on the location to start with. So if you can picture the parking lot behind, really the new Shuck and Shack, I think is what it's called there at the corner, working our way north to Milton Avenue, then on Milton Avenue all the way down to Roswell Street there at Fogan and Lyons and Minnie Olivia. There's the parking lot behind that we have 9 dumpsters in today. Those dumpsters were placed as a result of an invitation to bid that the city did back in 2021. So it was a tack-on that said we were going to put some cans there, and when we did the solid waste competitive procurement, they've ended up there. It started out as a smaller quantity. That quantity grew over time, and when I got involved with it several months ago now, it was 5 recycling containers and 4 solid waste containers. So that gets you to the total of 9 that's back there. And it has serviced the restaurants, the retail establishments, the offices, everything that's in those buildings fronting Milton Avenue and then that short building fronting Highway 9. I'm not exactly sure the circumstances by which the program, I'm going to call it loosely a program, was put into place back in 2021 as to how those costs were equitably distributed amongst those that were the users of those dumpsters. But I'll tell you what we ended up at, although I have not been able to find any sort of an agreement that we had made with any of the businesses as to actually formalize it, is we took a monthly bill, and to put it into context, that monthly bill is somewhere between $10,000 and $11,000. There was a finance formula that was done on it, and every place that was not considered a restaurant paid $100 a month to be able to use those dumpsters. And then there was this delta, there was this number left, and the number left was then split evenly between the number of participating restaurants. And I can tell you over time that may have started out as a really good formula and may have worked because there was enough non-restaurants participating and then there was enough restaurants participating that the rates were equitable with what people were paying in City Center, for example, for trash services. Probably not quite as cheap as they are in Avalon, but there's a different level of service provided over there. And that invoice would go out by the finance department and we would receive payment from those that were invoiced to cover the costs of that monthly bill. I can tell you that monthly bill was influenced to some degree and went up because we were getting contamination charges for solid waste being thrown into the recycling containers. And there's cameras on all these trucks, and all they have to do is when they tip it, if they see a trash bag in a recycling container, you get a contamination fee because it no longer is recycling. And so one of the first things that we did was to swap out the 5 and 4 of recycling to solid waste to make it 7 and 2, because the majority of what is disposed of over there is actually solid waste and is not recycling. We kept the 2 because we do have that ordinance requirement that says that we require a certain percentage of recycling to happen. So we've moved to 7 and 2. But I can tell you what really highlighted this as something we needed to solve once and for all is we got a monthly invoice from the trash hauler. We did the formula that we've always done, which was the $100 per non-restaurant user. And at the time, that month only had 4 participating restaurants. So you can imagine when you take a $10,000 bill and divide it 4 ways, it's a very different reaction than when you divide that 8 ways, for example, or even 9 ways, as we've had that many participants in the past. So we had a couple of restaurants get a $2,500 trash bill, solid waste bill, and raise the question. And it was a very good question to raise because it caused us to look into how we gotten to this point. And it was as a result of a 2021 RFP that we put trash cans out there. And then we treated it initially as an economic development item. And I think that was just to create some incentive for those businesses to continue to operate in that area of the downtown at the time. But for the last 60 days, we've had no offset to that public expense. It's been about $10,500, $10,600 for a couple months. And during those 60 days, we tried to work with the users, the restaurants, the businesses. I had a first meeting scheduled with everybody we could find on record, being attached to all of the businesses in that area I described. We had I say decent attendance, it wasn't even half of what the users would have been over there. And then we did a planned follow-up that we scheduled at the first one and obviously communicated all that out. And we had 3 people come. And that's when I realized that we were kind of with a little interest in solving it that way. I looked at the opportunity to put a special service district in place and to say, can we just carve out this area for the purposes of solid waste collection, and can we, just as a matter of policy, make that be the way that solid waste is collected in that area? And I can tell you, whereas it would be possible to do a special service district, it's really easy. It's just the adoption of a resolution. The only way I could get the city attorney's office comfortable with it was that if there was some sort of an opt-out clause, meaning that people would have the ability to say, I don't want to participate, and that way it would be a fee and not a tax. That's really no better than where the condition we're in today, because we have people that have just said, look, I'm opting out, and we've got these nine bins over there, and I don't really know that there's a really solid solution for anybody if there's not some sort of trash collection happening in that parking lot. I don't know. I mean, that may be for the businesses to figure out on their own, or I've always maintained while we've been having these discussions that it does us a lot of good, too, to help be a part of that solution if we can be. I went through the process of asking the finance department to legitimately set a solid waste rate. I mean, rates are fairly easy to establish, whether it's a trash utility or an electric utility or a sewer utility. You typically have a fixed component to the rate, and then you have some sort of volumetric component to it so that you can right size for the amount of use. In this case, we said there would be a fixed rate, and then we kind of added a volumetric component based upon square footage and use. So, we've been through that exercise and done that work, but if I can't implement that with a special service district and actually say this is the way it's to be done, it kind of fails because it really needs everybody's participation for it to work and for it to be an offset to the public expense, because right now the general fund is subsidizing that expense over there. So where am I going with this? So really, that's what's at issue. I was hoping that by putting it on the city council agenda tonight, and I let everybody know that I had been working with over there that this was going to be scheduled for a public discussion tonight, to please show up, be a part of it, listen to it. I did indicate to people that during work session items, we very rarely allow for public comment, but it was good to be in the room and understand what was potentially the future direction for this trash collection. A couple of things we could do, so I don't want to leave you without options. One is, and this would be the most extreme, is we could just get out of the trash business over there. We could just call up Republic and say, you can come at the beginning of next month. We put everybody on notice, and they just come collect the dumpsters, and we convert them back to parking spaces. It is a desired parking lot, and let me pause real quick and go back and just take one more topic real quick while it came to mind. There was some discussion at some point when the downtown was being developed about putting a compactor in that lot, right in the middle of it, and that would use less of a footprint and be less disruptive. I'm told it never went forward because at the same time there was an ongoing discussion as to whether or not that might be where the parking deck that is now at 92 Milton Avenue was going to be located. And so the compactor discussion failed. So we could get out of the trash business. We could see if anybody who's over there, one of the building owners, wants to work with a negotiated ground lease, if you all would be interested in entering into a ground lease for a portion of the parking lot so that they could go hire their own solid waste hauler and have their own dumpsters. Or we could work with somebody who might want to negotiate a ground lease for the purposes of installing a compactor over there. I think long-term that's the best solution. It's also the priciest one. But I'm here tonight to say I'm trying to solve for this expense and use of public funds for this very defined area. And I thought that the Special Service District was going to be the pathway to success, and I learned that it's not, and I'm just seeking some guidance as to how much effort you all want us to put into figuring this out, or if I've talked to many of you individually who've just said, look, we just, it's not good to be in the trash business, let's just get out of the trash business over there. So that's the basis for the discussion tonight, and I would just be interested in your reactions, comments, and I'm happy to answer questions or anything I know about it.
Mayor Pro Tem Merkel.
So yes, you and I did talk a little bit about it, and I think that since we talked, I think we get out of the trash business. We're not in it over here on this side of town. We're not in it in other areas. We're not subsidizing other people. I would ask that you and your staff, in the next 60 days, whatever amount of time you think you need, to physically talk to each business owner and inform them the certain date that's coming, and they'll need to make arrangements and maybe help them understand what those arrangements can look like. They can team up with their neighbor if they want. They can come to the city. If we have to, we'll gain a bunch of parking in the back from removing those cans. So if we give up a few spots in the front, unfortunately, that is the back of their building, to make arrangements for it. And some of them, we already know we don't know what they're doing with it, so they may not want anything to do with it. But I'd give them options on what to do and how to contact Republic or anybody else they want to contact to come up with a certain size that they need. And then get with staff as to, what requirements might be to shield it. I don't know if you can. I don't know how you force somebody to, we paid a lot of money to build what we put in the back, and the dang doors stay open half the time, and trash is on the ground. It's not policed up. But I think we got to find a way to help them get off on their own, and we get out of it, and then we just enforce, pollution or whatever you want to call it, issues that they end up dumping stuff on the ground, not cleaning up. So that would be my recommendation.
Okay. Would you be, I would just follow up real quick. Would you be interested, there's only so much space over there, I guess is what I'm saying. So of those 9 dumpster receptacle locations that exist today, would you entertain me bringing back a ground lease for that physical location so that they have a place to put a dumpster, even though it wouldn't be a dumpster we're funding, but I would be needing to bring back to you a ground lease so they could have access to that.
And I'm not even looking for it to be a money thing for the city. I just want to fix the problem. If they can get a variance for one parking spot, or we can give a variance for a time period that does expire, depending on how they use it. Yeah, I want to work with them. So I think it's sit down at the table, hash it out, and then come back to us once you've got a plan that most of them or all of them understand. Some are just not going to understand or not care or be opposed, but that's what happens when you get out of that business.
Understood.
Councilman Mitchell?
Thank you for bringing it. This has been a long-term issue for all of us. I'm wondering, what was the compactor cost? It's something we looked at. We were, the parking deck in that area was something we were considering building in addition to the one that's on Milton Avenue. But
yeah, we could have it priced. I could give you very quickly an idea, not tonight, but very quickly, as in like tomorrow, what the one cost that they just put in next to the Slurp and Ramen place, because that's a very recent compactor that just went in over there next to Bagel Boys. A lot of it would depend on how much site work they would need to do. Where it was designed in the past was right in the middle of the lot. So all of those perimeter parking spots would come back, and it was it was right there in the middle. You have to get power to it. You have to put it on a foundation. There's certain minimum requirements for a compactor, but you also reduce the number of days that you're impacted by having trash trucks. Like every day they're tipping trash in that parking lot now, and it's loud and it's disruptive, and there's big trucks back there. So you go to the compactor route, and you're going to decrease the volume of the collection in that parking lot significantly. It would be an undertaking, but it is, in my opinion, the ultimate solution for trash in that parking lot.
I think so too, because there's only so many parking spaces, and it would reduce the amount of parking spots that have been taken by this. I would like to see us as a city kind of, the only thing, and I've been through this for 14 and a half years right there with Jimmy, it's like herding cats when there's not an association that, like over on this side where you have City Center and the one principal owner who deals with it. You've got so many different people, and they're all involved with their own businesses, trying to run it and trying to make them successful, especially through challenging times. So, but the only thing that really gets others' attention is having a deadline of when they have to purchase a compactor. And if they hear from the city that we're no longer going to take up 9 spaces, that here's what you need to do, unless you come up with another way, because we can't have trash just being piled up and it attracting rats and things like that. And they've not taken the responsibility time after time of putting the trash even in the dumpster, because the least paid person at the restaurant is the one who takes the trash out, and he's tired or she's tired at the end of the shift, and it gets put on the ground. So I would like to support the idea of having a compactor where we will allow them the space, or we contract with them on that space, but they come up with the money to implement that, and then they run their own trash program.
Okay.
Would be the best solution I could have.
Councilman Heights?
What I'd like to see, Chris, is not so much us getting out of the trash business, which I think we should, but to get the individual owners into the business. For anybody who's at City Center, I think we have one of the proprietors of City Center in here today. It's embedded in their property management fees. I talked with one of the owners this afternoon at length about the issue, and there are people who are being responsible and paying for the trash. It's the ones who aren't that seems to be the issue. I don't even know who they are, so I don't know whose toes I would be stepping on, but there seems to be businesses who think that they can operate without paying for trash and have somebody else pay for it besides that business, whoever those businesses are. And I think the way to get the individual businesses back into business of providing for their own trash, it's just a cost of doing business, is that we should do a ground lease to individual owners. Or maybe it's a consortium of owners on one particular lease. In our lease, we not only have our zoning rights with respect to appearance, but we can build into the lease the expectation and requirements for what the appearance will be, and not get back what we had several years ago, where pictures were going around of piled trash behind where the food truck alley is. And as part of the education to these folks, and as I was explaining to one of the owners, we will hold each of these owners accountable for our zoning and our health requirements, as well as the restaurant health requirements. And either they will step up and absorb this as a cost of doing business, or they'll go out of business. But it's not for us to be subsidizing these businesses because they think they can get away without it. If we do the ground lease to individual or a consortium of businesses for that particular pad, they will then have to police each other, subject to the appearance requirements that would be part of the lease, in my opinion.
Great, thank you.
Councilman Brady?
excuse me. I think I went there last week or the week before, and I was actually surprised to see all 9 of them. And I remember it started off with 2 right there in that spot, so I was surprised how much space has been taken for all those dumpsters that I don't think that was ever our plan, right? It's kind of created this crux that we're kind of having. I would hope that that would be reduced. Like, we were looking at a ground lease that wasn't taking all those parking spaces, because they are prized parking spaces right there for people to come in and out of. And how can we look at other areas that we could have the trash corrals, right, screened in aesthetically? We make every other operator, every other piece of real estate that operates under this use to have that. So that needs to be kind of adopted. And there's other areas, little alcoves or other parking spaces around that perimeter that could possibly be used in smaller capacity, that it's not one big, like I said, attraction of rodents and everything else in there, and properly managed. So I would just kind of ask, could we reduce it in scale?
Great, thank you.
Councilman Dorito.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Chris, for all your efforts behind this. This is a complex issue that you've spent a lot of time on, so I want to appreciate that first and foremost. I have a question for Ms. Eswine regarding the Special Services District, and is it required under state law that people have the ability to opt out, or can you explain the reason for that?
Yes, so there's actually some pending cases before the courts that are looking at how fees could be construed as or considered unauthorized taxes. And the prevailing thought is that when there is not an option for someone to opt out, that it is, in fact, an unauthorized tax. And so you run the risk of, even if you have that opt-out provision, that it may even still be considered an unlawful tax. And so that's the reason for it.
And what would make it lawful? Just that
So,
the entire community is paying it?
Right, well, we're only authorized to tax as provided for under state law. And so
Okay.
we have our special areas where we're authorized to tax. In the absence of something explicitly giving the city the authority to tax, then anything that goes beyond that would be an unlawful tax.
And Chris, what is the success of the program? I know it's been in effect for a long time, but I mean, are most restaurants, and it's really the restaurants that we should be most concerned about because of the food stuff and things that have to be put in proper containers from a health standpoint. What's the success of the use of these 9 bins by the restaurant community within the city center area?
Yeah, so definitely the quantity's there. The thing that I don't have any sense of, because we don't have anybody out there tracking it, is how much of that use is driven by the restaurants that are in that area, how much is just casual stop-by use, because these aren't dumpsters that are behind any sort of a lock and key. And I know as I've talked with a couple of the restaurateurs, the thought would be that, if we could do this agreement with you, we would make for the aesthetics to look nice, we would make sure that it had a lid on it, we would make sure it was locked up and we were the only ones using it. And when you have a ground lease and you're, as a private entity, are the ones calling the trash service and paying the bill, you get to do all those things. And so that's not necessarily happening today. But I can tell you, I drove through there over the weekend and drove through there again today just to see what the quantities were. And there's definitely use. I will give a shout out because I can tell you that there's been a couple of restaurants that had more restaurants at the first meeting that I had, but have 2 that have been consistently interested in figuring out how to solve this. And that's been the restaurateurs at Ceviche and Truck and Tap. And they've been outstanding to work with. I just wish I could get more buy-in than just 2 of the restaurants.
Can I ask, kind of the other side of that question is, how many of the restaurateurs have their own garbage area?
I think only the building at the end that has that little parking lot that's across the street from the veterinary clinic. I think that's the only building that has any access to parking of their own.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier in your presentation, it's been about 60 days where invoices have gone out and they're not being paid. Is that by everybody, or when you say not being paid?
Yeah, I asked our finance department while I was trying to take a good faith attempt at getting this to work, to say, just hold off on issuing any more invoices. I mean, a $2,500 bill for solid waste collection is I'll use the word, it's almost a little bit insulting to our restaurants to send that to them and say that this is really what the real value of that solid waste collection is for you. And so I don't, if that was the wrong decision, it was a decision, but I've just held on to those invoices for 2 months while we tried to figure it out. But that's why I'm here now, is because I didn't figure it out.
My feelings on this evening is we've had this collection area for quite some time now. And I also want to weigh the impact on the business community in downtown Alpharetta to, you know, someone, I think maybe you did, Chris, in your presentation, referred to it back in '21 as maybe a decision to do this and the city to fund it as an economic development incentive to attract businesses, and you know, one more service we could provide to bolster up the business in the city center area, which makes sense. So I'm all in favor of shifting this to the business community, but I also want to be, you know, respectful of what cost impacts it would have on particularly the businesses in the city center area. I know the rents are quite high as it is today, and we've seen restaurants turned over consistently, and I'm not a restaurant expert, but you know, it seems like there's turnover, and it's not cheap to operate a business in the city center. So I want to be very sensitive to that, so that we're not driving business out of here and doing the opposite of what we tried to do to put this in place back in 2021. So I would want to see a period of time where we transition, you know, as mentioned by some members on the council, a compactor makes sense, and even maybe relocating it, as Councilman Brady alluded to. There are pockets down here that we might be able to do that in. So at the end of the day, I want to get the city out of the trash business, but because it's annual cost to the taxpayer that they shouldn't really be bearing. But I also want to do it over a period of time that mitigates the impact on the business community that we want to thrive down here. And so maybe a committee of businesses and people from the city can kind of work out a plan that makes sense, and a transition plan that is both cost effective to both parties, but achieves the goal we're trying to do, and not create a garbage area that keeps growing into almost a, lack of a better term, a garbage dump area, and unsightly to what we want to avoid in the city center area. So that's kind of the way I feel this evening. But thanks for the presentation. It's really well done, and appreciate it.
Thank you.
So Councilman Dorito is much more generous than I am. As Councilman Mitchell has said, this has been an ongoing issue for quite some time, and my patience is worn thin because we have bent over backwards to support those businesses and give them an opportunity to use very valuable land for their garbage disposal. And yet, they still haven't been able to manage that gracious offer that we've supported with the taxpayers. And so the current thing is not acceptable. I don't know how long it takes to transition to having grown adults who own buildings and businesses dispose of their own garbage and pay the money that it costs to do that. And I say that because the businesses across the street aren't being subsidized by taxpayers. They're paying rents to Colliers to cover that expense. And so it's not fair to the restaurants who are taking responsibility for disposing of their own garbage when others are not. And just to give you a sense of why I get frustrated is at some point over the past couple of years, I was notified that the reason they weren't collecting fees was there was even one of the businesses was paying one of the other businesses who was paying their fair share, and they were just paying like, I forget the number, but say $100 a month instead of whatever the charge should have been. and they were just dumping it in the other person's who was actually paying for it. That's just ridiculous. That's not what adults and proper business people do. Really, you're going to scam the city who's trying to be generous and provide you space and facilities to dispose of your garbage much cheaper than they could probably do on their own? I'm hopeful that this will get the attention of those business owners or those property owners. I think what we're making is a very generous gesture at this point. But if it doesn't work, and I mean in short time, if we're not getting an agreement that is going to be supported by those business owners, my suggestion would be just take those out. Take them out. If they think they can do a better job of getting rid of their garbage than what we're offering, please find it, use it. Everybody else in this city is a business owner. They have to hire a firm, Waste Management or one of the other vendors, to pick up their garbage. And they have to provide for that. And if these building owners and businesses aren't willing to do that, it's going to be their problem to solve and not ours to scramble around trying to cater to people who won't take responsibility for it. Now, that may be harsh, but it's the truth, and it's just been going on way too long for this to drag out for another year or another 2 years or another 3 years. So I think we've given clear direction, and if any of those business owners or property owners would like to speak with me or our council members, we're always available. We're in their restaurants all their time. So, absolutely. So that's all I had to say on the vote.
Great. So that's direction. It's all pointing in the same direction, and then I will report back as to the progress that we make. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lagerbloom. So the next work session item is the Unified Development Code text amendments for parking. Director Cook. Oh, that doesn't look like Director Cook. My agenda must have been misread. Mr. Woodman, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The purpose of this workshop is to present our findings and recommendations, as well as get your guidance as it relates to some potential code changes related to parking. We're bringing this forward because we've had some recent concerns voiced by Council related to parking in the downtown, as well as our parking ratio for elementary and middle schools. And I'll start with the downtown parking. Been some concerns voiced with a recent public hearing request. It was for a new business, and that business was located on the edge of downtown, so pretty far removed from the core of downtown. And there were questions regarding whether our downtown parking ratios were appropriate for properties that are on the edge of the downtown and further away from the existing public parking opportunities. So just to give you some comparison, in the downtown, we do have different parking rates that apply as opposed to citywide, but there are really only 3 uses where there are some significant differences. Restaurant is one. A restaurant in the downtown requires 1 parking space per 500, whereas citywide, it would be 10 per 1,000 or 1 per 100. Retail also in the downtown, 1 space per 500 square feet. Whereas citywide, that would be 1 space per 200 square feet. And then office, there are some differences, not as significant, but there are differences. When we heard those concerns, of course, we wanted to look at the downtown area. The area here in purple is the downtown overlay. And what we wanted to look at was, we know from studying National Parking Association, they do suggest that designers typically design for a maximum walking distance of 300 to 600 feet for retail customers. So we prepared this buffer map. It may be a little bit, trying to see if you can see that very well. So the green line here represents the buffer around existing downtown parking facilities. That green line is 300 feet. The red line is the 600-foot distance. And so you can see within the downtown, the buffer extends basically to Mayfield on the north, and then to Old Milton Parkway on the south. So we are recommending, to address this, we are going to recommend a code change to the downtown parking rates, that properties north of Mayfield meet the citywide parking ratios, and then properties south of Old Milton Parkway in the downtown meet the citywide. Yes.
Excuse me, Michael, we had this in previous meetings. The term rate and rates,
Ratio.
it creates some questions, and we start asking, well, how much are you charging? And so if you can just clarify that, thanks.
Yes, my apologies. I had a difficult time interchanging those two terms. Parking ratios is what I was referring to. So we are recommending a change to the code that properties south of Old Milton Parkway and properties north of Mayfield would meet the citywide rates. Ratios. The other item that that was brought up recently, that we had a request for a new private school location in the city, and that was for an elementary and middle school. And there were concerns that were voiced by council as it related to our current parking ratios for that use. Our current city parking ratio for an elementary or middle school would be 1 parking space for each classroom and administrative office, plus 5 spaces for visitors. When we look at these code changes, of course, one of the things that we do is we look at what our surrounding jurisdictions are doing, or similar jurisdictions, and what their code requirements are. So we looked at North Fulton, and you can see the various parking ratios at some of our surrounding cities. And then we took it a step further, and we looked at 2 existing schools in the city, Manning Oaks Elementary, as well as Hopewell Middle School. And we wanted to try to determine their existing parking ratios at those locations. And so we, of course, could count the number of existing parking spaces at those locations. We could get estimates on the number of teachers at those locations and associating teachers with classrooms at those schools, as well as administrative offices. What we found is that Manning Oaks had approximately 2.12 parking spaces per classroom in administrative offices, and Hopewell Middle School was at 1.94, so very close to 2 parking spaces per classroom in administrative offices. That's also very similar to the parking ratios used by Dunwoody, similar, not exactly the same, but Dunwoody, Johns Creek, and Milton. We also did reach out to Fulton County Schools to see how they design for new schools. Fulton County Schools requires 3 parking spaces per classroom. They do not address administrative offices within the school. They only, their requirement, they design for, it's not a requirement, but it's what they try to design for, 3 spaces per classroom. So given that the 2 existing locations in the city were closer to the 2 per classroom and administrative office, that would be our recommendation on the code change. So going from 1 space per classroom and administrative office that's currently in our code to 2 parking spaces per classroom and administrative office. And that concludes the presentation. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those, but I would like to hear any feedback that council has.
Councilman Brady, I saw you first. Councilman Dorito, you'll be second.
This is more of a confirmation than anything else. We're just talking about elementary and middle schools, right? We're not talking about K-12, right? Not the 10th, 11th, 12th, where you'd have students driving, and that capacity is much different than the non-driving students.
This is only elementary and middle, yes.
Thank you.
Councilman Dorito.
Thank you, Mayor. Michael, just a quick question on, we've seen in recent times requests before the council for converting, could be retail centers or office space. How does this type of code change play into those types of facilities? Meaning, you're going to still require spaces for the other retail or other offices within a building that a school might take over portions of a building. How does that work with the code as far as applying the number of required spaces? Does it include those, I guess, joint used spaces or?
So if we had a request such as one that was in front of us recently, where there was a school, but there was also another use using that
Right.
property, both uses would we would calculate parking for both uses. So the office use would require a certain amount of parking, and then the school use would require a certain amount of parking.
So would you double count the spaces for both, or they'd have to have their separate number of spaces to accommodate their use?
They have to have their separate, because they would not share parking.
Okay,
They're using the facility at the same
answers
time.
my question, thank you.
Any other questions or input for this item? As we said, it's a work session. It's not going to be voted on. It's just to give input. I see no one else on council that's got a comment, but I will say that I support the change. What we have found is when you make a mistake to the low end of parking, that ends up being a penalty to the other property owners nearby. And so I'd rather, if we have to accommodate a capacity, I think that's more appropriate.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. So that'll wrap up the work session portion of tonight's meeting. Move on to the consent agenda. Consent agenda is the city council meeting minutes from the meeting of June 2nd, 2025, and the financial management report for the month ending April 30th, 2025. Is there anyone that would like to remove anything from the consent agenda? Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards on the consent agenda?
We do not, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. So I'll call for a motion.
I'll offer a motion to approve the consent agenda this evening.
Second.
So we have a motion by the Mayor Pro Tem, second by Councilman Brady, to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please vote yes. And it does pass unanimously. So we'll move on to the public hearing portion of tonight's meeting, and the first item is the fiscal year 2026 budget and millage rate levy. This is the first public hearing. Director Tom Harris, I believe you have the floor at this time.
Mr. Mayor, I did just want to clarify for the record that the vote was actually 5 approved with 1 abstention. I think you announced it as unanimous, and I just want to make sure we notated that for the record.
I told you we got to change those colors. I'm partially colorblind, and so 2 of those colors are too close for me to distinguish.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for the correction. Director Harris.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is the first public hearing out of 3 that we're going to have on the 2026 budget. We've had 2 workshops on the budget and the millage rate that we're establishing. This is just per statute to ensure that the public has an opportunity, albeit we generally allow them to speak actually at the ordinance as well, and at the on the ordinance of both the budget and the millage rate, which is following under new business. So this is just opportunity, but I will go through at this point. We did make some changes, the substantive changes from the workshops since that time, and in the document in front of you now is we did remove the $50,000 operating initiative for tree lighting and added $71,000 for City Hall chambers, remote production and streaming services. In the T-Splost 3 account capital project initiative for T-Splost 3 exhibits, we reduced it by $150,000 from $250,000 to $100,000 was that line item based on some of the comments. We did increase the economic Development Toolkit for $50,000 for a total of $100,000 to provide for funding for consultants, counsel, and related professionals to study any applicable and implement economic development priorities. There is a capital and component, a one-time capital component related to the remote production for the City Hall chambers, and that is $61,000. And then there was also a new capital initiative added in the impact fee fund for the conceptual design of a passive park and Alpha Loop connection at 114 Roswell Street corner. Those are the primary substantive changes to the document.
Do we have any questions for Director Harris? Well done, sir. Thank you. Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards on this item?
We do not, Mr. Mayor.
However, if anyone would like to come forward at this time and speak to the topic of our fiscal year 2026 budget and millage rate levy, now is your opportunity. Seeing none come forward, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
And Mr. Mayor, this item was just for the advertised public hearing. We'll actually vote on it under new business.
Oh, my apologies.
Tom likes to do things a little different.
More FaceTime.
Yeah, I was looking at the previous item where it said motion and vote. Thank you again for correcting me. So that'll wrap up the public hearing portion of tonight's meeting. Move on to new business, fiscal year 2026 millage rate ordinance. Ms. Eswine, I believe we need a first reading on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. An ordinance by the Mayor and Council of the City of Alpharetta, Georgia, to fix the ad valorem tax rate of the City of Alpharetta, Georgia for the fiscal year commencing July 1, 2025, and ending June 30th, 2026, and for other purposes.
Thank you very much. Director Harris?
Again, good evening, Mayor and Council. This establishes the millage rate in total, again, at 5.75 mils. But it does specifically also mention that the operating millage rate is 5.030 and the debt millage rate is 0.720.
Any questions for Director Harris? Thank you, sir. Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards on this item?
We do not, Mr. Mayor.
However, if anyone would like to come forward and speak on the first reading of the fiscal year 2026 millage rate ordinance, now is your chance to do so. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. We do not have a vote on this item either, do we?
We will have a vote on the first reading of this one.
We will?
Yes, sir.
See, and I don't see that on my agenda. No wonder I get so confused. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the adoption of the City of Alpharetta's fiscal year 2026 millage rate ordinance.
Second.
Have a motion by Councilman Brady, second by Councilman Mitchell. Any discussion? Tom, it's a tight budget session, but I appreciate your efforts in getting this worked out for us. All those in favor of the motion to approve, please vote yes. And that looks unanimous to me. So it be. So we'll move on to the next item, which is the fiscal year 2026 budget ordinance. This is also the first reading. Ms. Eswine has once again the opportunity to read the ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. An ordinance by the Mayor and Council of the City of Alpharetta, Georgia, adopting the final estimates of revenue and expenditures for the fiscal year commencing July 1, 2025, and ending on June 30th, 2026, as its annual budget, appropriating the use of funds shown therein as may be needed or deemed necessary to defray all expenditures and liabilities of the city for such fiscal year, providing an effective date and for other purposes.
Thank you, Ms. Eswine. Director Harris?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Again, I mentioned earlier during the public hearing a few minutes ago what the changes were to this budget and the ordinance. This is the first of two readings of the ordinance of the actual budget.
Thanks, sir. Do we have any questions for Director Harris? Director Harris, my only question is, am I going to vote on this or not?
Yes.
Okay, once again, my agenda didn't specify, and I wanted to make sure we got that one right this time. Thanks, sir. Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards?
We do not, Mr. Mayor.
However, if anyone would like to come forward and speak on the budget ordinance, now is your chance to do so. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the adoption of the City of Alpharetta's fiscal year 2026 budget ordinance.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilman Brady, a second by Councilman Dorito. Any discussion, gentlemen? All those in favor of the motion to approve the fiscal year 2026 budget ordinance, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote accordingly. And it does pass unanimously. So move on to the next new business portion, and that is the request for proposal 25-1003, Fire Station 81 Construction Manager at Risk, Pre-Construction Services. Director Sisevich, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before you tonight is pre-construction services associated with the construction manager at risk format for Fire Station 81 for their clean room, as well as some modifications to the interior. Their proposal, they were number 2 initially. Winter construction was number 1, as it was written in the report. However, we couldn't come to terms with winter, so we moved to number 2, which was Ajax, which was right below there. It was a very tight panel discussion when we met with them, and the team is comfortable with Ajax. They've done fire station remodels in the past. They've done it with people living in there. They've done new construction, so this is not a new build for them. They've done it before. So their fee is $11,000 for the pre-construction services, and then we'll come back to council once we have a guaranteed maximum price, probably in about the next 4 months or so.
Okay. Any questions for Director Sisevich? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Ms. Shapiro?
We have no public comment cards.
However, if you'd like to come forward and speak on the fire station renovations, pre-construction, now's your chance to do so. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, to offer a motion this evening to approve the fiscal request for proposal for 25-1003 Fire Station 81 Construction Manager at Risk as presented this evening.
Have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem. I believe that was Councilman Brady. Any discussion, gentlemen? I'll just say that, Pete, it's been a long time coming, and I appreciate you getting us to this stage finally.
Yes, thanks, sir.
Thank you very much. All those in favor of the motion to approve, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote accordingly. And it does pass unanimously.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you, sir. As I had mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, I just wanted to remind you that the item that was printed on the agenda to be done later on in this agenda was deferred, so that we will not be hearing the public safety fleet replacement item. So the next item will be the contract approval for Kristen Orr, DBA Orr Contracting, LLC, contract renewal. Director Rogers, I believe you have the floor on this.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. It's always a pleasure to be with you tonight. If my mouth feels like it's got 3 tons of wet cotton in it, so if I'm not talking just right, you just ask me and I'll try to say it again. We are now for consideration of approval for the renewal of the contract with Kristen Orr, doing business as Orr Contracting, providing volunteer and education coordination services for the Community Agricultural and Sustainability Services Division out at Old Rucker Farm. This will be the 4th year that we have been under contract with Kristen out at the farm. She's a contract worker. She provides all of our volunteer, she handles all of our volunteer efforts out there, and we have a great number of businesses and community services within the city of Alpharetta that are going out and doing community service. She does that, as well as planning all of our workshops and classes out there. Like I said, this is the 4th year that we've done this, and we would ask for, be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any questions for Director Rogers? Well done, sir. Thank you very much. Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards?
We do not, Mr. Mayor.
However, if anyone would like to come forward and speak on the item regarding contract approval for Kristen Orr, DBA, or contracting, now is your chance to do so. Seeing no one come forward, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, Mayor, I make a motion that council approve renewal of a contract to Christian Orr, DBA, or Contracting LLC, provider of volunteer and education coordination services for the Community Agriculture and Sustainability Services Division of Recreation Parks and Cultural Services in an amount not to exceed $63,000 and authorize the mayor to execute all necessary documents.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
I have a motion by Councilman Hypes and a second by Councilman Mitchell. In discussion? All those in favor of the motion to approve, please vote yes. And it does pass unanimously. So that'll wrap up the new business portion of tonight's meeting. Move on to public comment. Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards?
I do not have any, Mr. Mayor.
However, if anyone would like to come forward and speak, now is your opportunity to do so. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Do we have any reports this evening? Well, I'll just note that I hope everyone here that is a father had a wonderful, happy Father's Day. Now, my agenda says there is an executive session, but I didn't think there was, so I just wanted to make sure before
Yes, no need tonight, thank you. We will, if I
No,
could.
thank you.
I'll just note, just so you all know, that we are holding a good many items for that 11:30 meeting 1 week from today. So we're going to try to get the longer executive session done when it happens in the middle of the afternoon as opposed to after the evening meeting. So we'll see you all, just as a reminder, we'll see you all a week from today at 11:30 instead of, and at 6:30 for the two budget meetings that happen, public hearings that happen next Monday.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you coordinating that. Gentlemen, since we have no executive session, would we hear a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I think Councilman Dorito had him by a hair. So the motion by Councilman Dorito, second by Councilman Mitchell. All those in favor of adjourning this meeting, please vote yes. And it does pass unanimously. Thank you for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you next week.